Good morning, College Park. I'm so excited to be back. I get nervous every time I preach, but no thanks to a newspaper article lifting the pressure. Made me feel like I needed to go back and rework a few things. But worshiping with you all this morning is such a blessing. You all taught me what unrelenting love looks like and feels like and acts like. You even loved me when I was a teenager. So the flashbacks that are rushing in, even the awkward ones with braces, they taste like comfort food. Thank you for having me. This is the third time I've preached from the book of Acts this year. The 3 times I've been able to choose my passage, I've chosen Acts. I've never had a close rendezvous with the book, so that might be what's drawing me to its stories lately. But I'm discovering that the way the early church navigates through its infancy is sit on the edge of your seat kind of stuff. I mean, really, Jesus is not physically leading the way anymore, and they are having to make decisions on their own, so you can imagine that prayer has suddenly floated to the top of their priority list. I think that the super early church is like a recent college graduate. My brother just graduated from college, so let's picture Reed. He's trying to figure out what to do next. He's in the middle of one of those times when anything is possible, but every decision feels like it carries the weight of his whole future. Job offers come his way, and he second guesses which one is the best commitment to make, if any at all. So the early church, like Reed, takes its fresh, newly educated eyes into unfamiliar territory, but that bag full of terror is sticking close by because now every single move it makes sets the course of its history, just like Reed. Except they're more like college dropouts, and they're being hunted. Exciting, right? The early church had a few enemies. Making enemies is easy, especially when society requires us to fit certain molds and to disagree with certain people in order for society to continue functioning. Heaven forbid someone from this side reconcile with someone from this side. If the Hatfields and the McCoys, better yet, if the fundamentalists and the progressives realize that they really are not so different from each other, that they are just fighting because somebody once told them that's what they were supposed to do, all hell would break loose. Society would implode. Having good guys and bad guys keeps us properly functioning. Somewhere in our youngest years, we digest this idea of good versus bad. Evil is real, so we have to have somewhere to put it. Early on, we consume the myth that says evil lives in other people. When my brother was about 4, evil lived in the TV. He got so angry with those bad guys once that he took his water guns and he started to shoot them. He'd help those good guys out and kill our TV in the process. When we get a bit older, it's harder to tell the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. We can't as easily pin good and bad to Coyote and Roadrunner. There's definitely some tension there that's messing with our empathy. But what if this whole time Coyote was just trying to tell Roadrunner that he had a phone call? What makes you angry? Debt? War? High school dropout rates? Generational poverty? The treatment of undocumented immigrants and their children? Hobby Lobby? I know, these are not people. They are systems that have lives of their own. But they mess with the lives and consciences of people. The system draws lines between us, calling one side good and the other side bad. And we, just by being a part of society, get pulled into seeing life that way. Back at our house, the pastor paralyzed me as he critiqued all the young people of the city. He called out each of the women in that women's group and criticized them by name, criticizing their lifestyle. In a culture where strong machismo oppresses women, he had called them lazy, confused, and stubborn, totally buying into and perpetuating that marginalization. No wonder they didn't come to church anymore. That anger is still holding on tight somewhere inside me. And I cannot imagine how the early church felt when Saul, their persecutor, wanted to join them. As part of the ruling system, Saul spends his days searching out those crazy Jesus followers. The way keeps creating little messes for the empire, so he's on damage control. But he has already had to kill a few. Saul wonders why they haven't learned to give it up already, especially after Stephen's stoning. In Acts 8, Luke explains that Saul was ravaging the church by entering house after house, dragging off both men and women. He committed them to prison. To these early Christians, the empire is the system that oppresses, and Saul is everything they are preaching against. So, in more than just his killing spree against them, he is their enemy. It's all kind of like Mean Girls. Saul gets to be Regina George with her perfect teeth. His mom gave him whatever he wanted growing up. He's spoiled, and the world has always worked in his favor. He knows the lines that the system requires. He knows how to divide everyone up and where everyone should be eating lunch and who's allowed to wear pink on Wednesdays. The dividing lines are necessary for society's survival, so why would anyone want to mess with the right order of things? Then there's Ananias, who gets to be Katie Heron, Lindsay Lohan, with her out-of-place naivete. The empire is rather hostile to him because he carries this Christian label. So he's convinced that keeping his head low will protect him, for the most part, from trouble. He tries to play by the rules, but he gets called out and put on the spot. Let's get a little backstory so we can understand why Ananias getting called out is such a big deal. The church's persecution begins with Jesus and doesn't end for 300 years. Not until 313, with Christianity's establishment as the official Roman religion. Despite the violence, the church grows. Somehow, the persecution attracts people to the Christian journey. But no one is trying to make a scene. They're just trying to figure out how to survive, and they have to have church in secret. They are especially not going to seek out the leader of their persecution. So we can undoubtedly insert a few expletives into Ananias' side of his conversation with God. You have got to be kidding me. Do you realize who that Saul guy is? He's tricking you. He's gonna pull some undercover cop stuff once I bring him over here. But in the relentlessly merciful spirit of our God, God laughs and pushes Ananias onto Straight Street to find a blind sinner praying. The line keeping Saul from being Paul blurred as soon as Ananias found him on the dusty floor of that small house on on the outskirts of the city with the most jarringly beautiful name. Ananias calls out to him, "Brother," professing for him his identity as a child of God. With the family name, Ananias welcomes Saul, the former persecutor, into the community of persecuted believers. The welcome is so relieving that Saul's faith springs up overnight. For days after his first encounter with Ananias, Saul is constantly on the heels of the disciples. He is suddenly the biggest Jesus freak in Damascus. He starts preaching as soon as he can put together the right words that convey his own faith. And everyone is confused. He's got some good stuff to say, and he's starting to get the hang of the miracle thing, but hadn't he come to Damascus to do some arresting? He is so convincing with his preaching that some of the system people plot to kill him. So Saul heads back to Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, he tries to buddy up to the disciples there, but they're all scared of him. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. It's ringing in their ears, but they cannot figure out how to do it. Despite their unwillingness to coach him, Saul does some work, faithful to what he preaches. And eventually, the people running the system in Jerusalem, the people he used to work for, are trying to kill him too. With the death threat heavy in the air, the disciples realize, finally, that he isn't kidding. Saul must be serious if he's willing to die. So they embrace him, and they send him on to safety in Tarsus. This radical embrace is an exact picture of the kingdom of God. According to theologian Miroslav Volf, taking the love your enemies part out of the faith practice makes it all unchristian. This is an essential, foundational part of our faith, showing us exactly where the kingdom is. The kingdom of God is messy and chaotic, we know. But remember, it is loving even when it hurts to love. It is unifying of society's prescribed divisions. As the church in Acts is just trying to find its solid ground, God wastes no time shaking things up, reminding them, not so softly, what the kingdom looks like. God chose Saul because even Saul's baggage could be baptized. The church's reconciliation with Saul is pivotal to our faith. I mean, Saul wrote half of our New Testament. What kind of faith would we have if the church in Damascus and the church in Jerusalem hadn't moved into the blurred lines of Saul becoming Paul? What if they couldn't move past the fear Saul had instilled in them for so long? What if every time they looked at Saul, all they could see was Stephen being stoned to death, only able to see that line between them? What kind of faith would we have? Christina was married for 11 years when her husband had an affair. The affair produced a child, and Christina and her husband divorced. Her ex did not stay with the other women, so Christina did not get to meet the baby girl until she was about 2 years old, even after he had started a new relationship. With a 16-year-old son from their marriage, her ex-husband frequently came by to pick up their son, toting the 2-year-old girl along. She saw the little girl and inexplicably began to love her. This past month, her ex remarried. While planning for his honeymoon, he asked if their son could watch the little girl while he was gone. "She spent 1 week with us," Christina said. "Best week ever." The girl's mom picked her up at the end of the week. This exchange was the first time Christina had met her, this woman who was there when her marriage ended. She greeted her with open arms, wondering who it was that was hugging and loving this woman in her house. "I feel it had to be God," Christina said, "because it was just so natural and so easy." The woman asked Christina for forgiveness for all that had happened. And Christina immediately knew how she was going to respond. "You were forgiven even before you had to ask," she told her. That space of reconciliation, of opening up the story on either side and being vulnerable with each other, has torn down the lines between them, freeing them from the weight of the relationship they are supposed to have. The redemption that those blurred lines offer them is a fullness of life that honors their humanness and their connectedness. Christina confesses that she knows reconciliation is the painful and joyful risk we take as people of faith. That means that when convicted felons, marked child abusers, and volatile politicians approach us, even remembering all the pain they have spread, we open our arms. Committed to each other in intentional community, we vow to never leave each other alone. We vow to take chances on each other and believe in each other and be vulnerable with each other. We vow to work together toward the kingdom fulfilled on earth. We remember Saul. We know we are people working to turn the world upside down, like we cannot even imagine. We blur all the lines that divide us and pit us against each other. We are people proclaiming a different law, a boundless law, a law of love. Suzanne Ross wrote a book inspired by Wicked the musical. In it, she explains that being a contrast society means that the meaning we ascribe to the word good requires fluidity and impressionability. Good is not about being perfect or popular, she says. It is being honest about your failing and open to the influence of others. It is accepting limits on your behavior and repenting your mistakes. And evil is not who or what someone else says it is, but a failure to love. May we never fail to love.